At its foundation, the Mordhau controversy is mostly made up of the same pieces as a dozen other tedious games culture blow-ups of the last generation: an independent developer with a small game in a niche genre, with a ferociously dedicated fanbase, and a controversy made the news, failed to get its ducks in a row correctly on the first try, and suddenly a not great thing happening in the nebulous world of online player spaces caused by a bunch of specific individual assholes is supposedly, depending on who you ask, an indictment of the game, the developers, this or that staff person who answered a question wrong, the company, the culture, or maybe even 19th/20th century science fiction author and socio-political theorist H.G. Wells for writing Little Wars and codifying strategy wargaming as a hobby in 1913 in the first place. No, really, look it up. In the specifics, Mordhau is an online medieval melee combat game put together by the small developer Triturnian that's really gotten popular very fast and has been hit by most of the usual problems that befall small developers that suddenly land big fan bases. Specifically, they largely prioritize building and maintaining the game space over wider esoteric community matters, presumably on the basis of manpower focus, and the game initially being made and largely played by the sort of person for whom the often sketchy nature of online games and communities is either a given or not considered that big of a deal. So when it turned out that one of the game's most popular threads on its official community forums had become, is it seriously called? Yeah, okay, there's no way we can say that. Or that. And that the live chats had been thusly spilled over into with behavior like, wow, guys, just use your imaginations on this. Just a whole lot of racist stuff, basically. It turned into a mounting problem that Triturnian hadn't really built any real safeguards in to handle. It was really hard to report, and also they hadn't thought to make a plan on how to deal with this becoming a problem if it did. Worse still, when people started reporting on this, there was no unified approach in its place, so the response got all mixed up with a separate issue about whether or not they were going to let players opt out of using different race or gender options in the character toggles, and how the forum users felt about that, and some staff member statements that sounded an awful lot like gamers' rights as cover for generic intolerant stuff, but seemingly were grounded in a misunderstanding of the discussion that still carried a somewhat defeatist attitude about community policing always going to be a losing battle, so why should you bother in the first place, that was later clarified by a statement. And to be honest, this doesn't seem like that much of a complex issue as it does a multiplicity of very simple issues all piled up on top of one another. So on the one hand, if you're going to build an official forum into your game, you're kind of responsible for what goes on there. On the other hand, it's not hard to feel some sympathy for a small developer who didn't plan on their game getting huge suddenly being expected to manage a forum like a major, especially when the majors aren't good at that shit either. On the other hand, is this stuff really that hard? I mean, we're told it's hard, but it seems it's like a will thing more than a skill thing. Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and everyone else keep saying that they can't police hate speech worth a damn, and can't keep like angry politics and white nationalism and racism and Nazis off of their forums, but then like this knitting forum called Ravelry just up and said one day, hey guys, no more Trump stuff. And then they just did it, just like that. But then on the other hand, this is still part of the conversation of negative behavior in the gaming community and how developers need to do better. And then on the other hand, it's the kind of thing that gets people saying there's something specific to video games that draws people like this in. And I don't think that's true either. I think bad actors are just going to gravitate to where they can feel free to act badly. And niche, poorly policed gaming spaces are just one of the last spaces that qualify as that in our increasingly open and connected society. And it's not really fair to try and read some specific thing into gaming or gamer psychology. That seems like a cop-out to me. Or people trying to make it sound like there's more to read into gaming than there is. But on the other hand, as to the substance of that, no, of course, a developer isn't required to add or not add any content they don't want to. But on the other hand, if the lack of content is the reason you're drawing a certain stripe of audience that's toxifying your community, you don't want that. On the other hand, well, okay, clearly that's more hands than I actually have in reality, and thus demonstrative of the problem. If you're going to design a complex game, it's going to require complex management, and that means of people and player bases as well as the pixels and the algorithms, whether that's what you got into game design for or not. No, you're not responsible for what bad people do in your forum, obviously, but you are responsible for how you respond. I mean, that's why those words have, like, similar roots. So yes, it's not fair to completely gang up on the people who made Morehouse for what their users did, but they are still responsible for fixing how this problem eventually plays out. At least that's how I see it. Now, speaking of roots and complexity, as that business with the hands a moment ago ably demonstrated, even this is not really a subject that can be comprehensively knocked out in just a couple of minutes with room for jokes and sight gags and cutaways, at least not in a way that does it justice on a week-to-week basis. The Game OverThinker has always been an evolving, changing show. It was unique when it started, it was unique as it evolved across multiple platforms and websites, and this iteration that helped launch the new Escapist was very different and unique in and of itself. And now it's time for this show to be different again. Beginning soon, the Game OverThinker will return to the Movie Bob YouTube channel and once again be supported by the Movie Bob Patreon, where it won't be conforming to a weekly schedule and can move in a freeform pace or length of time, be as short or as long as it needs to be. But don't you think for a moment that this means there will suddenly be any empty spaces here on The Escapist. Nuh-uh. Instead, get ready starting next week for The Big Picture, now twice weekly. And also next week, I'll be on the floor at San Diego Comic-Con, so if you're there, feel free to say hi. Remember, change is good. See you on the other side.